Hey, what's up, everybody? Scott Spreitzer here. He's Amal Shah. We are DocSports.com's Against the Spread with Spreitzer and the Shah. First week of October, and we are going to talk about 7 football games, 4 from college, 3 from the NFL. We're going to get to all of that. Plus, we'll have our best bets at the end of the show. Kind of talk a little bit about what each of us have going on over at Doc Sports this weekend. I want to first tell everybody about the little banner across the top of the screen there, $60 free account at DocSports.com. And basically what that is, if you're new to Doc Sports, if you're not yet a member, you can simply click on the link below this video, get yourself set up for a free $60 account, which you can then use on any of Amal's or any of my daily packages. You can even mix them up. Buy one from Amal, buy one from me, whatever you want. And again, you just get it started by clicking on that link below the video. Basically what it is a great way to give DocSports.com a trial run if you've not yet done so. Amal, we got 7 games, not quite as juicy. I don't think we got any Georgia-Alabama clashes in the card or on the card this week as far as from a fan standpoint. But what a week last week as we head into this week. And we are going to talk about a couple of undefeated top 10 teams in just a moment. First of all, I wanted to ask you how everything went last week. Hope everything went well in college and pro football and beyond.
It actually went very well. My one loss, I went 3-1 last weekend. I had Baltimore was my big play in the NFL. And then I had in college 2 smaller plays on Colorado and on Oklahoma. I have to be honest with you. I'm very mad at myself because on a podcast I talked about the Colorado game. I said this should not be the number. I thought it was completely wrong. Should have been a bigger bet for me. And then of course I say unfortunately the Oklahoma game. But Scott, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not one to complain much. I had Michigan -9. It was 24-3 to start the fourth quarter. Minnesota couldn't score against 5 defenders usually, let alone 11. And somehow they managed to score in the fourth quarter against Michigan, 21 points. So wound up with the L there, but look, feeling pretty good. And I think we've got some good games coming up on tap. I can't wait till we get to our free play. A little bit off the radar for me type of free play we got coming up later on. And then the games you've selected, I got to give you credit for one thing, man. I think you picked the 4 hardest games in college this weekend.
I was looking for 4 quality matchups, like marquee matchups that anybody could enjoy watching. And the more I, decided to dive into the handicap of them all, I'm thinking, boy, this ain't easy this week. And I did pick some tough handicaps, no doubt about it. Last week I had a first 2 bad weeks of NFL, first 2 weeks of the season, and now we've cashed the last 2 weeks. We went 7-0 with college and pro football last week, 12-2 the last 2 weeks. Yeah, thanks, man. It was a tough start. First 2 weeks of the NFL season. So 12-2 the last 2 weeks. And as of right now, as we cut this video Wednesday at about 6 p.m. Eastern time, sitting at 28-9 with my last 37. So I'm knocking on wood here. We don't want to jinx anything. Let's get to it, Amal. Let's talk first about, of course, an ACC battle in Berkeley, California. That's where we're used to holding ACC battles. But it's Miami laying 10.5, total 55 at Cal. And listen, late night game of Berkeley. This game's going to go about 10:30 p.m. Eastern time. So have fun with that, Miami fans, as you're watching from South Beach, if you do pay attention to your team when they're on the road. But they've been as high as a 12-point favorite, now sitting at 10.5. Questionable call in the end zone last week against Va Tech, saves their undefeated season at least for another week. And then Cal, I don't know, man. I hate this whole schedule of ACC West Coast teams nowadays because this team has been flying all over the place. Road games already at Auburn and the SEC, obviously non-conference game, and then of course at Florida State. And that was a misleading loss for Cal. They actually outgained the Noles 410 to 284. They settled for field goals that were set up, line of scrimmage, 8-yard line and 11-yard line. That's a game they let get away from them all.
No question about it. And by the way, I didn't know you were running for office down in Dade County. You said questionable call. Are you kidding me? I thought the call came from the ACC home office. We got to get 2 teams in the college football playoff. The only hope left is Clemson and the University of Miami. We can't have them lose on a Hail Mary to Virginia Tech, who's probably going to fire Brent Pry at some point in time within this calendar year or next year. But look, I think this Miami team is uber talented. Offensive line, defensive line. I like the quarterback play with Cam Ward. I'm not as high on Cam Ward as everyone else is. I think he's got a little too much mustard on the hot dog for me. I'm like, make the play. Stop kind of slowing down in the middle of the field. I hope one of these days somebody knocks his block off, I'll be honest with you. I mean, just get out there and run and hustle and do your thing. But you look at this Miami team, they're pretty good. They faced a big challenge against Virginia Tech as they were huge favorites. Could have gotten that game in-game, Scott, at 21.5 when Miami led early on in that game. So, but I look at this team, California. Justin Wilcox done a nice job. You're right. They should have beaten Florida State. I was on Florida. Excuse me. I was on Cal in that game on the end game. I ended up losing. I took Cal money line. I thought, hey, they're going to win this game. Give me the plus price here. They come up a little bit short. Mendoza's done a nice job. Thomas has run the ball effectively, averaging 7 yards per carry. The concern I have right now, though, is I'm concerned that the talent of Miami is still overwhelming. But time scoring situation for me in this one. Cal on the points, late night start, which you pointed out. 10:30 Eastern time in South Florida would be the body clock time for Miami. I'll take Cal with the number here, but not overwhelmingly confident. I wouldn't be surprised if you wake up on the East Coast Sunday morning, you see Miami won the game, 27-17, or Cal ends up losing the game or even pulls out the win 20-17 or something like that.
Yeah, I like your score predictions because that's my prediction here for the show is the under in this game at 55. And, Cal's got a good defense against both the run and the pass. Their offense needs work, obviously, and they have to really do their best to keep this one from becoming a track meet because I don't think they can hold up over an entire 4 quarters if it's a Miami-style football game, which would be putting more points on the board, running plays a little bit quicker in the play clock. So I do think Cal has enough to be able to, keep the tempo more in their favor. And for that reason, I like the under in this one. Next up to the SEC, undefeated Tennessee laying 13.5 to Arkansas. That total at 59.5. Tennessee open as low as 11 of all here in Vegas. Arkansas is a tough out. I mean, they lost in overtime to Oklahoma State. They lose to A&M 21-17. They actually outgained the Aggies by about 80 yards, but they finished with a -3 turnover margin. And if you look at that Oklahoma State game, statistically, they wiped the Cowboys out by like 250 yards, 7 yards per play, but 4 turnovers. And again, a -3 turnover margin did them in. So you got all these injuries, all these turnovers. I get it why that line is eked up a little bit to where it is now with Tennessee. Originally, I'm thinking a couple of weeks ago, looks like a good spot for Arkansas, but I'm concerned about the propensity to turn the football over at inopportune times.
Couldn't agree with you more. You mentioned the Oklahoma State game. I got completely lucky. I had the Cowboys in that game laying 7.5. They ended up winning the game by 8 because of the overtime situation, but really fortuitous. But to me, right now, when I look at this matchup, for me, it would be the Razorbacks are no play here. The one negative I have with Arkansas is Taylon Green. I didn't like him when he came from Boise. Great athlete. He's tremendous against defense on 3rd down and 4. The play breaks down with his legs. He can get you 15, 20 at a rip, no problem. But the interceptions, 5 interceptions so far in 5 games this year. And that's where the rubber meets the road for this Arkansas team. If they can control the turnovers, I think they've got a chance to be very effective. Look, we know what Tennessee can do, but then you look at Jaquinda and Jackson. He can run the football. If you're Arkansas, control the clock by running the ball, keep Tennessee's offense at bay. Look, I think Tennessee's offense is good. I don't think they're quite as elite as everybody else thinks. We saw what Oklahoma was able to do against them. That was a game where Oklahoma should have been much closer on the scoreboard than they were. For me, I would look at the Razorbacks. There's no way I'm laying 14 in a game on the road in SEC play here. It's Razorback or bust.
Missouri's at Texas A&M, state of the SEC. A&M laying a deuce. They're laying 2. The total sitting at 49. This is a good game to gauge for the rest of the season on these two teams because, first of all, A&M hasn't looked all that great this season. They got completely shut down by Notre Dame. They were so in a close win over Bowling Green and, outgained by about 80 yards or so in a 4-point win over the Razorbacks, the 21-17 win. A&M forces turnovers and they don't make costly mistakes. But if you shut down that ground game a la Notre Dame, you put A&M behind the 8 ball. I've got Missouri over their wins total. This was one before the season when I made that play that I counted as a loss. I'm not overly impressed with Missouri thus far, but Boston College, a close win there. Boston College, pretty good football team. And I think we're finding out Vanderbilt's a little bit better than all of us expected before the season began. But again, that was an awfully close call. You don't want that if you're the Missouri Tigers. So the defenses for these two teams are, I think, the best these two offenses have faced this entire season. A&M gave up 23 to Dame. They held each of their other 4 opponents to under 20 points. You got Mizzou, 3rd, 5th, and 19th in total yards, passing yards, rushing yards allowed per game. I think this one stays under 49, and I'm really interested in seeing how Mizzou looks for the interest of my bet that I made before the season on their wins total of all. It's a tough call for me on the side. I'm going to go with the under here.
I agree with a lot of what you said. Real quick, what was your Missouri season win total? Was that 9.5, or 8.5? Excuse me.
Actually ended up at 8.5, which
Okay.
that was kind of the difference between how, again, I don't want to say too much about it was a big difference if I got nine and played over. It is a situation where you're talking about nine's a push, even though there is that good fortune if you have nine and you do push. At 8.5, it just made it a little bit bigger play for me than what I would have at nine. So, and this was a game again that I thought that they would lose. The schedule is not overly tough at all for the Missouri Tigers. And again, I haven't been all that impressed with them thus far. They haven't been quite as, I don't know if the word's dominant, but at least quite as good as I thought they would be thus far. If they can win this game, I'm ahead of the game as far as my handicap is concerned.
Could not agree with you more. And you hit up on another point that I completely agree with. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this game earlier in the week. I think it's a great game to watch. I would look towards the under in this game. You mentioned that both teams defensively are very good. You look at Missouri so far this year. Yeah, they gave up the 27 against Vanderbilt, but that was a little bit of an aberration. I think Castellanos at Boston College is very underrated. I call him a poor man's Kyler Murray, similar type of build and speed in terms of their mobility. Missouri's offense hasn't impressed me. But on the flip side, A&M with Marcel Reed, I like him. I think there's aspects of his game I like more than Connor Wegman, who was the starter, who's been banged up. Reed's ability to run the ball on third down and 5 play breaks down. He's really quick. He's got that ability. But I don't like this A&M team offensively. I think points are going to be at a premium here. This feels like a 24-20 type of game under the number. And I thought you said it best. I haven't been impressed by the Tigers. And you mentioned the schedule. Missouri, they win this game. They got the game against Alabama, and I think that game is in Como. They've got a chance. I don't know if they're going to beat Alabama, but I think they've got a chance theoretically if they can win this game against A&M in the bookend the end of October to really go 12-0. Now that's looking way down the road, but in terms of this Saturday, I would look towards the under here, Scott. I just don't think these teams are going to give up points. You mentioned it. The Notre Dame game, that 23 that Notre Dame got, that's deceptive. That was a late score. They've held everyone under 20 points. I've always thought Mike Elko was a fantastic hire. There's just certain guys. I remember when Stoops was at Florida and he went to Oklahoma, I'm like, this guy's going to be good. And I feel the same way about Elko. Team is ready defensively. Can the offense deliver what Missouri would potentially deliver on the opposite side? If A&M can do that, they're going to win this game. But defensively, both sides should flourish. I like the under here.
Well, we're in agreement on that one. I want to head to Lincoln, Nebraska, close to my hometown, and it's the Cornhuskers, of course, hosting Rutgers this week. Nebraska laying 7, the total 41.5 in that game. And I got to tell you, Amal, when you have a great week, and you know this, when you have a great week in sports betting, especially in football, there was some good fortune on your side. When you have a terrible week in football, whether it be college or pro, there's usually some bad luck that went against you. This particular game kicked off my 7-0 week. I had Rutgers over Washington. Fortunate win. I'll take it any way I can get it. Washington missed 3 field goals against Rutgers and what ended up being a 3-point Rutgers win. As far as this game, Ethan Kelly McCannis, who used to play for the Gophers, he did well with RPO against Washington. And what Washington likes to do is run a bare front defense, as they call it. And Nebraska likes to do some similar stuff. What I saw out of Rutgers is they were incapable for a good chunk of the first half of being able to do exactly what they wanted up front on defense. They kind of forced Washington out of what they want to do defensively in the second half of that game. This is going to be a physical contest. Rutgers, you know what they're going to do. They're going to run Kyle Monangai right at the heart of the Husker defense. Illinois was able to push Nebraska's defense around a bit. Rutgers will attempt to do the same. I'll tell you what about this game also. If you look at Nebraska against Illinois, Nebraska dropped out of the top 25. They've not been back since, which I think is a little harsh. Nebraska had their chances to beat Illinois. They missed a field goal late in regulation that probably would have won the game. They had the touchdown pass in the end zone to go up 7. Guys coming down, doesn't have both feet down. Rutgers kid rips it out of his arms and takes it away from him before the Nebraska kid's feet were set in the end zone. It was ruled a touchdown. It was reviewed and ruled an interception. And it was the right ruling, by the way. The review officials did a good job there. That's how close they were to winning that football game. And Nebraska played far from their best game. The thing about Illinois that's different than this Rutgers team, Altmaier can pass, run the RPO. He could take advantage of Nebraska's secondary. They're working in a defensive backfield coach this year who doesn't seem to be really seeing eye to eye with Tony White, who's the DC. And I think that caused some confusion in that game against Illinois. The problem with Rutgers, they don't have the ability to pass the football. It's run or basically nothing else. I think it makes it a little bit better preparation for the Nebraska defense this week.
Could not agree with you more when you break down Rutgers offensively. The thing with Nebraska is, I'm not going to say this is completely back to the black shirts defensively, but they're pretty close. You mentioned the 24 points in regulation they gave up against Illinois, 31 in total after the overtime, but this is a good defensive team. You mentioned Rutgers' ineptitude offensively, and then they've given up points, allowed Washington to move the ball. They allowed Virginia Tech to move the ball against them. Look, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but in 25 and 26, Dylan Raiola is going to be a Heisman candidate. That kid's, he's got it. He's talented. I like this team. Against Purdue, they played well. They just didn't finish off drives. There were penalties on the things, a couple of blocked field goals along the way. I think they'll get that corrected. I think Rutgers is a nice program. I think Greg Schiano's got them playing in the right direction. I did not lay 7 here, but this would probably be the side I would lean to, is Big Red laying 7 here. I just don't think Rutgers can score enough against Nebraska. I would look potentially at a team total on Rutgers under here, Scott. You got a total in this game of 40.5. You're probably looking at Rutgers 16.5, 17.5. If you can get 17 or higher, I would look at an under here. I think this is Nebraska's type of game, and it's going to play right in the hands of Big Red.
Yeah, and I think they're being undervalued a bit because of the loss to Illinois, which again could have gone either way. Rutgers got outgained by more than 220 yards by Washington. And again, I win the game with Rutgers. We needed a little break there. They gave up about 8 yards per play. They gave up over 200 rushing yards on 7 yards per carry. UW, lit them up on the ground and through the air. And if you also go back to that 3-point win over Va Tech, Rutgers gave up 6.8 yards per carry to the Hokies. What Nebraska can't do is have this come down to special teams or field goals because they stink right now. You kind of hit on it there a bit when they missed 3 field goals last week or whatever it was. And they're letting guys get through when it comes to attempted blocking of the field goals. And it's just a mess right now in special teams. That's their weak link right now with this football team with Nebraska. So they're going to have to take care of business when it comes to special teams. But again, I think they're being a little undervalued here. Like your prop there on Rutgers under their team points total, I think they have a tough time even reaching 20 in this one. They're going to need help from Nebraska, and this year Nebraska is not turning the football over. Let's move to NFL action. We got early action in London, England, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. It's the Jets and the Vikings. Right now, the Vikings laying 2.5, total right around 40.5. Minnesota, one of the final 2 unbeaten teams in the league. There's Kansas City, there's Minnesota, and Amal right now through the first 4 weeks, Minnesota's looked like the better team when it comes to those two. Brian Flores, one of my favorite DCs in the NFL, is really getting the job done with the Minnesota Vikings. They're dominant against the run. The one thing they got to watch out for is if the Jets get hot in the passing game, because I still think this Minnesota defense can get beat through the air. So that's what the Jets have to do. Get Aaron Rodgers healthy early. I don't think Breece Hall is going to run wild in this one. They got to be able to pass the football on to running downs to open things up a little bit.
Completely agree with you. I can't wait to see this matchup between Justin Jefferson and Sauce Gardner. Arguably, the best cornerback in the NFL, and for my money, it's not even close. JJ is the best receiver. But one thing I'll point out for people that may not be familiar, this Minnesota team has been excellent in the first half of games. Against Green Bay, 28-7. Against the Houston Texans, 14-0 at the break. Against the San Francisco 49ers, it was 13-7. Against the Giants, 14-3. And if you take away the fact that Green Bay, you can't take away, let me rephrase. If you look at the fact that the game was out of control, the Vikings were up 28-7 going into the fourth quarter against the Packers. The Packers scores 22 points in the fourth quarter. They've been dominant. They gave up 10 points to the Niners, who tried to furiously come back. This team, Kevin O'Connell's got them playing very well. If Sam Darnold doesn't give up the fumble, I'm not worried about INTs with him as much. My issue's always been fumbles with him. This team is tough. I like the combination of Jones and Chandler in the backfield. You mentioned the defense. The Jets are not on the same page. And I'll tell you another problem with the Jets that I have is Aaron Rodgers seems to complain anytime anything doesn't go his way. The number of times he makes a facial expression or reaction, if it was a young quarterback, people would be calling him out left, right, and center.
I was watching the Coward Show the other day. I have that on sometimes in the background, and I heard him saying, and I had to tune in. I had to stop handicapping. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. And I heard him saying he looks like 2 different people compared to last week when they won and this past week when they lost. And he was commenting on Robert Saleh talking about having to make some changes with some of the things that they go on in the pre-snap on offense. And they asked Aaron Rodgers about it. And he really showed a disrespect to his head coach, which is the second time this season that he's done that with Robert Saleh. And I'll tell you what, it's evident that these two don't see eye to eye. And the funny thing about it, it's like almost like Robert Saleh is trying to figure out a way to gain Aaron Rodgers' respect rather than the other way around. Aaron Rodgers, he just flies by his own, mindset. And we all know that, whether you like him or not. And one of the problems, though, is he's coming over from winning and he's going to the perpetual losing New York Jets.
Yeah.
And, they talked about it the other day on the air, and I agreed with it totally, when they basically came out and said a winner does not want to hear how to win from a loser. And that's what Aaron Rodgers is having a tough time getting past right now, a winner trying to hear how to win from a loser. So we'll see, what happens if these guys can get on the same page on Sunday. It's a really good spot for them. We'll see if they can get it done. Ravens laying 2.5, total 50.5 at Cincinnati. Actually had the Bengals in their win. And listen, their 3 losses have come by 12 points. The offense has been getting better as the receivers and the offense gets healthier. The run defense is shaky for Cincy, and Baltimore is the top rushing team in the league. And by the way, did you see the yards per play margin for Baltimore last week? 3.8 plus 3.8 against the Buffalo Bills. And of course, you said you had the Ravens. Nice call there. You never had to sweat.
No, I thought they'd bounce back. Look, I don't believe in Buffalo as much as other people do. I think if you realistically look at it, they've beaten Arizona, Miami, and Jacksonville coming into that matchup. In terms of Cincinnati, I'm telling you, I'm down on this team. I told you a couple of weeks ago, Scott, I don't think this team's going to make the playoffs. The loss of Joe Mixon to me has been significant. We saw it in week 1 in Indianapolis, what happened with this Texans running game with Joe Mixon in the fold. I think he adds a difference and a comfort layer or level there for Joe Burrow in the backfield when he's throwing the ball in certain spots. I think defensively they're not as good. You're not getting the pressure from Hendrickson and Hubbard. Those guys usually are able to pressure. The secondary has been anemic. This is not a particularly good team defensively for me. I didn't play this game. Look, I'm not a fan of laying points on the road in the division, but if you're Baltimore, you're 2-2, and you really dominated your last 2 football games. You're a foot length from potentially tying up or being within 1 point of the Chiefs and then going for 2 against the Chiefs. Should have beaten the Raiders. This team could easily be sitting at 4-0. With a win on Sunday, they eliminate one of the 3 to 4 teams in the AFC that's a contender for them. Buffalo, Kansas City, obviously, Cincinnati. I don't know if you put Houston in there. I don't. But this is one of those teams that you eliminate with that elite quarterback. They go to 1-4. I think it becomes an incredibly uphill battle for the Bengals to get into the postseason. I lean towards the Ravens here. One of the reasons I love the Ravens coming into the season is because they signed the 18-wheeler. That thing looks fine in terms of Derrick Henry. He is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah, tremendous last week. I mean, that was his best game of the season, and now you got to really be, concerned when you see the way he's running the football with this offense. And again, Cincinnati is cheap on defense. It's an organizational problem. They don't sign defensive players. They've seen guys leave, and they're giving up a ton of yardage and points, especially on the ground. Having said that, I'm going to back the Bengals here. I had them in their win. Going to go one more time here for the show. It's not going to be a premium play, part of the package. The Ravens obviously look great on Sunday night. But in their first 3 games, you were talking about first half with Minnesota and how they play. The Ravens have been good in the first half before Buffalo, but their second halves have not gone well. In their previous 3 games, they were outscored 53-31 combined when it came to the second half. I think Cincinnati is going to take this right to the end and find a way to win this game. And again, it's not a premium play. I just like him here in this spot. Baltimore gets a little weird in the second half of games. We'll see if that happens again here. Am I going to be shocked if they take care of Cincy? No, I'm not. In the long run, Baltimore is the better team, especially on the defensive side of the football. All right, Sunday Night Football, Cowboys at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh laying 2.5 and total 44. I got a really good way for Pittsburgh to win football games. The recipe: don't score offensive touchdowns, you go 3-0. Score offensive touchdowns, you lose. They had 3 offensive touchdowns during their 3-0 mark. Last week, they get 3 offensive touchdowns in 1 game, and they lose the contest. So, listen, the offensive line is banged up this week. Having said that, Dallas is terrible against the run. They're banged up on defense. Parsons is doubtful. I'm not the biggest. Amal, I don't know about you. I'm not the biggest Micah Parsons fan. They pay him too much money for what he brings.
Well, to me the big thing is he had the first 2 years where he was all pro and a pro bowler. And he's
Mhm.
gotten a lot of credit for it. To me he's a guy that's not quite as good as the hype. He plays for the Cowboys. I always say this, you play for the Dallas Cowboys, you get a lot more credit than you deserve. You look at the top broadcast teams, Troy Aikman, Daryl Johnston, Tony Romo. These are all former Cowboys. So he's getting a lot of hype. I agree with you on Micah Parsons. I don't think he's as good as everybody else seems to think he is. Um, I'm with you on Dallas. I'm concerned Steelers have 3 offensive linemen now that are out for the year. It's a huge blow for this team offensively, but Fields has done enough to put them in positions to win. Offense was great last week. I think it was the defense that was the problem. This is an important game for both teams. Dallas can't go to 2-3 because I don't know if you had. Well, I did not have the Commanders coming up and cooking on the heels of Philadelphia and Dallas all season long. I think
Right.
they're going to be a bottom feeder rookie quarterback, but Jaden Daniels is having a historically great start. To me, right now, though, Dallas, I've never been a Dak Prescott fan. And Scott, I got to tell you real quick, I covered the Cowboys for a long time. And I always cheered for whoever's playing the Cowboys because having lived in Dallas, Cowboy fans were just, they drive you nuts. They think they win a game, they own the Super Bowl. The reality of it is, you're never going to win anything with Dakota Prescott. That's just the truth. You're stuck with an average quarterback where the front office didn't have the guts to say, let's move on from this guy because he's not good enough and elite enough to get us to where we want to be. And that's why I think Dallas, you're going to see a team that's around 9-8. This is a typical type of game where I think on Monday morning, you will see Dallas complaining about what went wrong. I think the Steelers find a way because as good as Aubrey is, the most
Yeah.
consistent and percentage-wise best kicker in the history of the National Football League from 50 yards or better is Chris Boswell.
Oh, I agree, 100%. By the way, as far as Dallas is concerned, I just can't believe they're not getting Rico Dowdle more involved early in the offense. This kid, a running back, I mean, he had 11 carries last. He should be getting 20 carries a game, and they should be throwing the ball to him at least 6 targets out of the backfield every week. Rico Dowdle's their man. I mean, if they do that, I guarantee you they're going to come close to winning these games that they lose, if not win. Dowdle's the real deal, and I'm just shocked so far, McCarthy and his offensive coaches, that they haven't involved him more than they have in this offense. I really like this kid, and I think he's being underused in Dallas. Real quick note about my experience in Dallas, since you brought that up. 1991, 92, whatever it was, Steve Berline was playing for the Cowboys, and I was doing a Notre Dame football show. I was hosting and producing, and they flew me down to Dallas, Texas, to spend some time with Steve Berline, talk about the upcoming season. It was I'm going to say it was Major League Baseball. Well, it definitely was. It was Major League Baseball All-Star Week. And so Berline invites me over to his condo. So I go over there in Dallas, talking to him. We sat there. We got the All-Star game on. We're talking about the upcoming season. I'm asking him questions about, what was it like the first time you saw Lou Holtz walk into a room, things of that nature. So we talked about that. We talked about the Cowboys. But the reason I was there was for Berline, for the Irish. But I spent the next day and a half or two just cruising around Dallas. I hadn't seen people that football crazy, burning up for their team since I had left Omaha, Nebraska, and saw the Cornhusker fans, years before that. But Dallas was an impressive city when it came to the way they support their team, but they're not tough. They're country club. That's their biggest problem. They're country club, these Cowboys, this team, and they got to get tough, and Dowdle would bring toughness to this team, I think, on offense. And right now it's a two-man offense between Lamb and Dak, and that's about it. But anyway, I do want to get to best bets in just a moment with you. Before we do that, Amal, let everybody know what you got going on this weekend over at DocSports.com.
Yeah, actually got a great play in the SEC. I think this is one that might fly a little bit under the radar for people. So looking forward to that. And then in terms of free play, Scott, I'm going to give it to you. This is a Thursday night game. I'm usually not a big Thursday night type of player, but
Mm-hmm.
this one really stood out to me when you look at the matchups coming up this week and particularly this weekend. Sam Houston State going on the road against UTEP. I got to tell you, I love betting against bad teams. Been betting consistently against Rice this year. Usually UTEP is you take them points. We're not taking
Yep.
the points here. We're laying it with Sam Houston State here. I just think the Bearcats are a much better football team than this UTEP team that really struggles. They've gotten off to a slow start at 0-4, but it's not even just about the fact that they're 0-4. It's the fact that they just can't really put a ton of offense together. That's a concern for me. I think they'll really be challenged here. I think Sam Houston State puts the wood to them.
I didn't think you were old enough to remember you taking points. I haven't heard that in years, in decades. And there were poker players that I heard it from way back in the day. So maybe that's where you started talking about it. But yeah, I haven't heard that in a long time. I'm going to stick to the show. You're going to start them off early. I'm going to make them
Yeah.
wait till 10:30 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday night. And my best bet is going to be under 55 between Miami and Cal. Little Saturday night football from Berkeley. Wanted to tell everybody that we're on this real nice run. 7-0 last week, college of pro football. 12-2 the last 14. Overall, as of 6 p.m. Wednesday evening, 6 p.m. Eastern, we're sitting at 28-9 with my last 37 plays overall. So check the daily packages. And of course, college of pro football this week. I am going to have my first 8-star play of the season. You know, my card might not be 7 plays deep this week, but I've got 3 that I really like, and one of those is an 8-star play coming up this weekend. And the line hasn't gone crazy. Very happy where the line has stayed throughout the course of the week. Folks, you can check out the show each and every Wednesday. It's up all week long. Don't forget about that $60 free account over at DocSports.com. For Amal Shah, I'm Scott Spreitzer. Folks, you know what to do. Let's put them in the win column, everybody.